much to everyone who's joining us online as well. We're live streaming right now on our Facebook, Instagram, our LinkedIn, and our YouTube channels. So thank you so much for joining us. Just before we start, I'd like to talk a bit about Bongo Hive and what we do. So Bongo Hive is a tech and innovation hub. We've been running for 12 years. Basically, what we do is we work with great minds. We believe we're a hive of great minds, and we work with different people, different spheres, but at our heart is tech and innovation. Our entrepreneurship unit runs different programs that work with different entrepreneurs to just really train and help entrepreneurs. Our consulting units work with corporates to foster the culture of innovation. And we have our co-working spaces that offer co-working to different people at different packages. If you like more information about us and what we do, please feel free to visit our website, www.bongohive.co.zm, or feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media platforms, either via Bongo Hive, Bongo Hive Consult, or Hive Co-working. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, entrepreneurs and innovators, it is with great pleasure that we welcome you to today's Bongo Hive FireSide Chat webinar under the theme Cultivating a Culture of Innovation. We are honored to have with us an industry titan, a visionary who has not only shaped the landscape of modern entrepreneurship, but also has dedicated his time and expertise to nurturing the next generation of trailblazers. Our distinguished guest needs no introduction in the world of business. As the co-founder of Starbucks, Zev Siegl innovation spirit has left an indelible mark on the global entrepreneurial community. However, what truly sets him apart is his unwavering commitment to fostering the growth of budding ventures worldwide. I have had conversations prior to this with Zev, and I kid you not, he is very passionate about entrepreneurs and about the next generation of entrepreneurs and how they will do even better. And he's very passionate about speaking into them about that. Over the past year, Mr. Siegl has generously shared his wealth of knowledge with an impressive cohort of 39 startup entrepreneurs across 19 countries this year alone. Through his mentorship, and he has illuminated pathways to success, guiding these aspiring leaders the intricate maze of the startup ecosystem. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Zev.
Hello. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Fine. Should I go ahead and give an introduction?
Yes, please, feel free.
Okay. I want to welcome you all to this seminar. I'm talking to you from Seattle, which is a city of about 2 million people in the northwest corner of the United States, very near Canada. And I live right in the center of the city, and I'm talking to you from my office. This seminar is really addressing innovation. And I've learned a lot about innovation in my life, not only from starting companies, especially Starbucks, but also from listening really closely to the people that I try to help with their startups. These are people all over the world now, thanks to Zoom. I have conversations several days a week with people in other countries. Normally, they're about 30 years old and they're starting a company. So they have been my teachers. I don't think that if I had only done the startup of Starbucks with my two friends, Gordon and Jerry, that this would be a very interesting seminar. It would just be one person's experience. But because I have had long conversations and listened carefully to so many young entrepreneurs, I've really learned a lot. And I'm up to date, and despite my gray hair, I'm quite current on what's going on with startups in many countries. So within a business that wants to create an innovation, there has to be an establishment of freedom to be creative, not just you, the entrepreneur, but your team. And one of the toughest things for entrepreneurs to deal with is giving people the freedom to make a mistake. It's very difficult to do for many people who are entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs tend to be what I call high control people. They want to control everything. And it's hard to establish a culture of innovation unless you give people freedom. This is the most basic form of freedom, by the way, is making sure that the conversations that you have among your team are actually two-way conversations. The myth of the strong man or strong woman doesn't work very well when you're trying to establish a company that's going to be doing something that other companies, your competitors, haven't done before. So it requires people who can listen, not only the startup team, but the first group of people that work for the company. It's a give and take conversation. Farhan, would you like to break in now, or should I continue?
No, I think we can start. Thank you so much. From just the introduction, I'm sure you guys can tell that this will be indeed a conversation that will be relevant. And by the end of this webinar, you'll be able to walk away with tools that will be relevant to your business now. And our hope is that you will be able to create and foster a culture of innovation that will help you create innovation, not just for your business, but even amongst the people that you work with. So my first question is, in your experience, not just with Starbucks, but with mentoring different businesses, what are the fundamental elements of a culture of innovation, and how can entrepreneurs and organizations cultivate it effectively?
Well, I in my first remarks, I gave one of the really important criteria, which is that there has to be the freedom to discuss things and the freedom to try things, including making a mistake without having to lose your job. Yeah, I'm talking about your employees and your partners now. So I'm not going to talk about that anymore right now. There's another basic thing about the world of innovation, which is it worthwhile to do this innovation that you're thinking about? Really? Does it add anything either real or intangible to the marketplace? Or are people just going to shrug their shoulders and say, this doesn't matter, I don't want to support this? And the basic question is, why will potential customers become buyers? And I'm talking about customers who are B2B customers, business customers, or B2C customers. I raise this question because pretty often in my initial meetings with an entrepreneur, I will discover that they're completely product oriented. That's all they want to talk about is the product or the service that they're going to provide. Oh, this service is so cool, everybody's going to love it. Our software is so interesting. Let me tell you about how our team developed it. It was a really exciting process. And it's only when I start asking questions that they start talking about the customer's point of view or the potential investor's point of view. What do they think? So the innovation has to be worthwhile doing. It has to do something for your customers and for everybody else in your community, especially funders. Also, early on, it's important to establish that this wonderful idea that you've got is actually going to make money. Now, I don't have much experience with nonprofits and NGOs, so keep that in mind, that my world is about for-profit companies. So how do you find out if your great idea your product or service is actually going to be profitable. I'm not talking about profitable on the first day. I'm talking about profitable over a period of 3 to 5 years. Well, you might be thinking, well, of course it's going to be profitable. Why would I do it if it's not going to be profitable? Well, once the answer to find out if it's going to be profitable is, of course, to do financial forecasts. And, Bongo Hive spends, like most accelerators, spends a lot of time teaching people how to do credible, that is, good financial forecasts. So wouldn't you be surprised if your wonderful software didn't have much of a market, that you couldn't possibly achieve the sales that you're projecting, and actually isn't such a hot idea except to you? Well, this is part of the culture of innovation. You have to be a little bit realistic to make sure that you're not wasting your time. The funders are a very important part of this world of entrepreneurship and innovation. You have to convince funders that your innovation is going to be productive. That's going to be accepted by the potential customers, that what I would call your target market. And they have to be willing to pay the price that you're going to sell it at. In some cases, they sign contracts. So what is going to be appealing to each type of funder? Your first funder might be an accelerator. Well, excuse me, your first funder is probably going to be you and your family. Your second funder is going to be, I hope that everybody has a very wealthy uncle who just loves you and will help fund the early stage of your startup. But then you have to go outside to find money. And sometimes accelerators, you enroll in the program, you learn a lot of things over a period of months, and then sometimes at the end of the program, the accelerator connects you with very early funding. This is probably pre-revenue funding. That is, before you're making sales, you get a little money. And then later you need angel investors. These are people who invest from their own account, and you'd have to convince them that what you're doing is going to work. Well, this goes back to, is it going to make money? Do you have customers? Is there a strong interest? In some cases, some startups have a test customer, somebody who thinks they're really cool, and the customer, which might be, say, a trucking company, is very interested in this new software you're developing. They sign on and become a test customer. Well, that would be very exciting to an accelerator or to an angel investor, that you're actually working with someone, they're co-developing it with you. They're helping make sure that this trucking company is helping you make sure that you're tuned to their needs. That's pretty cool. Then later it gets even tougher. I'm sorry to say that after you have gotten through the period where you've graduated from the accelerator and now you have a little money from angel investors, these are, again, individuals. Now you're going to start talking, if you have survived, to venture capital funds. Well, let me tell you, venture capital funds talk to people like you every day. They know a lot more about developing companies, maybe, than you do. And they're tough. They analyze companies for a living. I mean, they do it all the time. Frequently, they have staff, a young graduate of a university who has an MBA, doing the initial study of what you're trying to do and whether it's going to be successful or not. So at that point, we're talking about large sums of money. You will also hear the expression family offices. Family offices function very much like venture capital, but they are doling out the money of one family. But they function very much like venture capitalists. So those are the stages of getting your innovation to the point where it can actually be a functioning company. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Zev. My next question then would be, how does an entrepreneur manage risk while being innovative,
Oh,
especially for startups? How do you strike the balance between I need to be innovative and try new things, but there's risk attached to it, especially as a startup? How then do you balance this risk? Because this is an issue around the world. Even with the startups you mentor from across the world, this is a prevalent issue. How do I remain um, innovative, but also taking calculated risks? Like, where do I strike the balance and how do I mitigate that?
those of you who are listening, Farn and I have not rehearsed these questions, but that is a really cool question. And I'm really glad she asked it. Thank you. Uh, this is the subject called risk management. And risk management is a term that you frequently hear when you're talking about big corporations, like Pepsi-Cola, Coca-Cola, manufacturers of automobiles. You will often, in articles that you read about those companies, they'll talk about risk management. Well, risk management also applies to startup companies that don't even have customers yet. Well, why is that? Well, number one, you don't want to fail. Number two, your uncle who loaned you some money or gave you some money in the initial part, he really doesn't want you to fail. Also, his wife, your auntie, she's watching you like a hawk. And then, the accelerator doesn't want you to fail. Nobody wants you to fail. So what do? Well, instinctively, most people manage risk. So what's the risk? Well, one of the risks is that you won't be able to complete the product. Suppose you're making new software. Well, it's a risk that you discover that it's very expensive to produce it, to have programmers develop it, and there's a risk that you won't have the money to pay them. There's a risk that you are so focused on the product that you're not paying attention to the fact that a competitor product is being developed in a neighboring country. There's a guy in Nigeria who's doing just what you're doing. That's a problem. So you can manage that risk by monitoring what's going on, staying tuned in the business social media, staying tuned to what's happening, what's being posted in other social media, and also on the web. You look for you continually look for new companies that are starting in the area that you're in. Now, this doesn't mean that if you've discovered that there's a guy in Nigeria who's doing what you're doing, only he's well-funded and you're not, that doesn't mean you can't go ahead. It just means you have to assess that risk. You have to determine let me give you an example. I work with a guy who he's in the technical end of the coffee industry, and he discovered that there was just this exact story. There's a guy in another country, in Mexico in this case, who was doing sort of what he was doing. So he was able to have a look at their product. He signed up for a test, and he discovered that the product that they were producing was not good. It was not ready for the market. The programmers that had worked on it hadn't been professional enough. So he stopped worrying about them for a while. That's legitimate. That's risk assessment. That's a classic example of risk management. Do you have the right people on your team? Oh, we haven't talked about that. That's a risk. There's a tendency for people to get into business with people they know well. Your friends from what you went to school with, your cousin, your brother, your sister. Well, that's fine. But when you do a risk assessment for your business, you have to say to yourself, is my cousin really the best person for that job? Yeah, he's got kind of an alcohol problem, doesn't he? the last family party, he was so drunk they had to carry him out. Well, this is a bad prospect for you. So you want to make sure that your team, that you have the right people in place, and that you encourage them, and you also bring to their attention. Well, a man that I work with had a problem. There were four founders. One of them is the CEO. This is also in Latin America. But one of the founding partners, who was a programmer, started slacking off. He wasn't working as much for the startup as he said he would. And the CEO contacted me, and we talked about it. And the CEO on his own decided that they would have what's called an intervention meeting. So all four partners got together and talked openly with the partner who was kind of not doing his full contribution of time. And they brought him back into the fold. He actually didn't realize that they had noticed that he wasn't working as hard as he said he would. And the whole situation was saved. To me, that's a risk management operation. We've got a partner who's not, it's like having a flat tire on your car. One of the wheels isn't working anymore. You jump on it. You to manage the risk, you see if that person can be saved, and in this case, he could be, and then you go forward. So, but it requires an openness to managing risk. It requires that you not be so in love with the product that you're blinded and you can't see that there are some issues out there with a competitor or with funding or with the development of the product. Requires being alert to what's happening around you. Okay.
Thank you so much, Zev. That was really insightful. And I think for me, you've made me rethink certain things, even things like a team and how that could be a risk. I was like literally taking notes. I'm like, I need to rewatch this because, wow, it was. Thank you.
I'm working. I'll give you another example of this. I'm working with a fellow in Panama. He is post-revenue. They're already doing about $1 million a year with a software program that helps companies find employees. It's based in Panama, active in Colombia. There are 4 founders, 2 guys and their wives. So after I had gotten to know him, I said, I'm sorry to have to ask you this, but what are the qualifications of the 2 wives? Because any funder is going to ask you that. And it turned out they were more qualified than the 2 guys. They had lots of experience, but he hadn't bothered to tell me that. So I said, you need to manage any risk you have with potential investors, people who haven't said yes yet. You need to feature their qualifications, because the funder is going to automatically assume when somebody has their spouse, that is their husband or their wife, on board as a founder, that something's funny, that maybe they're not qualified. So in this case, I'm happy to say that all 4 of the founders were well qualified.
All right. Wow. Just wow. I am just simply amazed. My next question then, tapping into.
Hang on, before we go to the next question. What if you really want a person who's not qualified to be your partner and to develop the company? Well, you can ask them to get more training. That's okay. You could even, if you have the money, you can pay for that training, so to get their skills up. So I just want to say that it doesn't mean that the person who's a little weak has to go away. Okay, sorry.
No, it's fine. My next question will be then, the global entrepreneurial landscape is rapidly changing. I mean, right now, there's a lot of technological advancements. The market dynamics are changing. Even society itself has experienced a lot of shifts over the last couple of years. How can entrepreneurs stay ahead of these shifts and adapt to the evolving business environment? A lot of the time, sometimes a business is great, but because they are stuck in the past, they don't know how to adapt to the they're not able to survive in a new condition or in a changing condition, especially now with all these technological advancements, including AI. How then do entrepreneurs continue to innovate but stay ahead of the curve with all these changes happening?
Yeah, we all have to adapt, don't we? We have to adapt to the changing scene. And now it's not just the changing scene in the city where you live, it's the changing scene all over the world. Well, number one, thank goodness we have Zoom and LinkedIn, where you can access people. And I want to say that before Zoom, when you wanted to talk to someone, you had to go physically somewhere and talk to them. Yes, you could talk on the telephone, but in most cases, you went to meetings. Zoom changed all that. And not only that, an absolutely fabulous thing for entrepreneurs is that when you make a Zoom meeting, people normally come on time. For instance, Farn told me that we would start at 9 o'clock in the morning, my time, 7 o'clock in the evening, your time. There's a 10-hour time difference. And so I logged on at 9 o'clock. But that's what happens with most Zoom meetings. All those people who used to make you wait in their lobby outside their office and insult you by making you sit there for a half an hour, that's over. LinkedIn, what a fabulous tool. You can find out, you hear about somebody, so you can look them up. And this is true in Africa too. There are many, there's a high percentage of people in business in Africa who use LinkedIn. So you can read about them. But you have to remember that when you look up a person on LinkedIn, you are reading what they wrote about themselves, not what somebody else wrote. Now, yes, I know down below in the lower part of the page, other people comment, but they only ask people who love them to comment. You're not going to see bad comments. So those are two wonderful tools. Some of the other tools are that can reduce your risk from being surprised by something happening somewhere else in the world. I have three other tools. One is to travel, which might mean just taking a bus ride to the next country or the next city. But it also might mean going to the airport and flying somewhere, in the back of the plane in the inexpensive seats there, because you might learn something in another city. You might have a meeting with somebody, or you might, if it's a tangible business like, say, food service, you would, of course, be able to see things. Research on the web, I've already mentioned. You all do it. I'm sure everybody on this call looks up things on the web every day. And the final thing is the conference. There are conferences in your industry, online and in person. In-person conferences are back now. During the pandemic, they disappeared completely. But now they're back. I've been to a couple myself in the United States. My gosh, you can learn so much at a conference. You can go to presentations. Some of the presentations will be given by people who are maybe your competitors. That would be nice, wouldn't it? And you can walk up and down the display hall. I went to a conference here on the West Coast of the United States 6 months ago, and I walked 3 miles. I had a pedometer with me. I walked 3 miles up and down talking to everybody I could in that industry. So there are also online conferences in which can be very, very useful. Maybe you could be a presenter at an online conference. It's a way to raise your profile, to get people to know who you are. But you can also watch other people who are probably telling you too much. They're telling you things that you really wanted to know that are very helpful to you. So this is a form of managing risk, staying connected globally. It's important.
Thank you so much. Just while we're still on this conversation, I'd like to talk about the psychological aspect of innovation, because innovation is not just the entrepreneur doing things, or the team members creating, that there is a psychological aspect to it. So the psychological aspect of innovation is crucial. Yeah. Can you discuss the mindset and the cognitive processes that foster creative thinking and problem solving? And how can entrepreneurs cultivate these qualities? How then can they work on the mindset and the cognitive processes that help them foster creative thinking, and so that they're in a space of constantly problem solving?
Another great question. The getting into that mindset where you're basically questioning the industry that you're in. And it might be food manufacturing, it might be an innovation in agriculture, it might be an engineering innovation in the mining industry. These are all, these are just a few of the areas. So most people who are interested in starting a company or researching an idea are already in that psychological position. They are questioning. I think a fairly typical person who wants to start a company is someone who's been working in an industry, and they see something that could be done. They go to the leadership of the company they're working for and say, I'm that guy you see in the hall. I'm actually 4 steps down from you, but I have an idea that is just a killer good idea, really great. And you tell them what it is, and they say, well, that's a really great idea, but we're focused on what we're doing, and we're not going to be able to invest in that. And you think, these guys are idiots. This is a really great idea. But the truth is, from the point of view of the management of a medium or large size company, it's what you're proposing might be a distraction. That's what they would say, a distraction. So what do? Well, you become an entrepreneur. So you have a lot of information about your industry. And if you are a person who's willing to take some risk and manage the risks that you can, then you're going to go out. This is typical where the psychological aspect of innovation is a little more difficult to get going is in medium and large size corporations. Because, and this is true also in academia and higher education, it's really tough to come up with a new theory if you're, say, a geologist at a university, because all the people at the other universities who are like you're a professor of geology, have all basically agreed about geology, and now you've got a new idea. So they go, when they're at meetings, they start talking about you, and they say, oh, she's got this really crazy idea that the crust of the earth was formed a different way than everybody agrees that it is. Or in the case of a corporation, a for-profit corporation, Louise has this idea that we should be going into a new area because one of our customers is going into that area, but we don't have the resources for that, so we're not going to do it. So in big organizations, this is what happens. Good ideas get squashed. Not always. For instance, I live in Seattle, which is where the headquarters of Amazon is. And Amazon has a strong reputation of investing time and a little bit of money into many good ideas that their work teams develop. We're talking about 20,000 people working for Amazon in Seattle. You would think that no new idea would ever be able to advance. But Amazon has a strong culture of innovation. That doesn't mean that they're going to fund it, beyond the research, but at least they're going to give it a shot at getting some basic research done. So generally, though, that's the exception. Generally, big companies do what they do, and they keep doing it, and they don't innovate quickly. And it takes a lot of people, for instance, people like Farhan from the outside, to push corporations to make innovations. Now, the entrepreneurs, as I said a minute ago, are different. They embrace innovations. They do the research, and when they think they're really onto something, then they try to move it forward.
Thank you so much. My next question then will be innovation in most cases might take a long-term perspective. Like you have to sometimes play the long game. But market pressure can sometimes push you in a corner to favor short-term gains. How do you advise entrepreneurs, especially, I'm asking this from like your mentorship side, how do you advise entrepreneurs on maintaining the balance between your immediate business needs and the long-term vision of innovation? How do I make sure that I am relevant and my business continues to thrive, but my long-term innovations don't die at the same time?
Yeah, another great, you can tell from Farhan's questions that she has been around the world of entrepreneurship and innovation for a long time. So first, let's talk about one aspect that people who are starting companies face all the time. This is especially true, what I'm going to say now, about the tech industry. You have an idea, it's a small innovation, but you can build a company around it. Maybe you'll get acquired in just 3-4 years, a bigger company will acquire you, and you'll make some money. But you've got to move now. It's a time-sensitive idea. You are sure that other people are thinking of the same thing you are, or you have already been to a conference where somebody working for, pick a company, Microsoft, mentioned this and said that it's something they're looking into. Oh my gosh. So you really have to hustle now. But it's a problem because the pressure, that's Farhan's word, the pressure that you feel from the time sensitivity in the example that I'm giving, can also cause you to increase the risk. You're going to make, it's an increased possibility that due to the pressure, you'll make a bad decision. But there's an even bigger risk. And that is that you will go to talk to the funders that you need some money. I'm going to assume again, that it's something technical and you need a lot of programmers, and you have to pay them. So you try to get funded, but you're really actually not ready to talk to the funders yet. You haven't, your technique for presenting to them isn't so good yet. Your financial forecast isn't so good. Your PowerPoint looks like it was done by a high school student. And your financial forecast, well, it's just not believable yet. Yeah, it hasn't been researched, but you're going crazy. You're calling Farhan every other day to ask for help. You're going crazy because you know that this opportunity is terrific, but it's time sensitive. So that's real life. I work with people who are exactly in that situation, and it's risky. It's risky to plunge ahead, to jump off the cliff, and not have the materials that you need, the forecast, the PowerPoint, the connections, all these things that you accumulate usually over a period of months. You're trying to do it in a week. It's very risky. So time sensitivity is a major issue. Is there another aspect of this about the long game that you wanted me to comment on, Farhan?
No. I think you've covered it really well. Just to shift a bit away from this, my next question will revolve around social responsibility. There has been a huge call and a huge demand for people to be more conscious of their social responsibility, but also of sustainability. So the concept of sustainability and social responsibility has gained prominence in the recent years. How can entrepreneurs infuse a sense of purpose and sustainability into their innovative endeavors, creating both positive and profit impact? So how can entrepreneurs make sure that their endeavors or their enterprises are not just making donations, but are purposeful enough to create both positive impact while you're making profit?
This isn't just the voice of foreign, my friends. This is the voice of many investors who are asking this question. So you have to pay attention, frankly. If the funders are interested in social responsibility, and many of them are, you have to pay attention. So there are different categories here. Last year, I worked with a company called Horus, Horus. They're from Colombia, but they're now based in Germany, and they make prosthesis, artificial limbs, especially artificial legs. And it's an innovative, they're innovators. So let's see. You're making artificial legs. Let's assume this. This is one type of customer. That is, the very nature of this company is helping people. This is not like Amazon in the United States, trying to sell everything in the world, manufacture products that you need to consumers. No. That's just consumption of products. This is helping people. And they have been given somewhat of a boost by the war in Ukraine. And I'm sure that the war between Hamas and the Israeli government is also going to give them a boost, because so many people are going to need prosthetic devices. So for them, all of their initial funding, this is a couple $1 million, lots of initial funding, came from what are known as impact investors. Impact investor, that's a code word in the investment industry for social responsibility investing. So if somebody says to you, well, our firm, we're impact investors, what they mean is you got to do something socially responsible or we're not going to talk to you. So this little company that I mentioned, Horus, no problem. I'm working with a guy occasionally, I don't talk to him very often, who's developing a tea from a byproduct in the cocoa industry. I think it's the leaves of the cocoa tree that he's making a tea out of. And, it's a new idea for a beverage. He's in West Africa. So he's finding that the people that he approaches really like the idea that his raw material is a byproduct that's just being, used for fertilizer now. So impact investors think, hey, that's good for the environment. Get more use out of that cocoa tree. So what happens if you're making a machine or software for an industry? Well, that's different. How can you make an impact? How can you appeal to people who want you to be socially responsible? Well, Firen hinted at one way, which is you can make donations. But that's sort of, and people do that. For instance, I'll give you an example that doesn't apply to entrepreneurs. I went to a Home Depot store. Home Depot is a monster chain of big box stores that sell hardware and home improvement supplies. Very, very large locations. And at the checkout stand, it turned out that they were contributing to a local school that's just 3 kilometers from their location. So this must be a national corporate program where they tell the manager of each store, go out and find a local school and give them some money, because our customers are going to like that. And as a corporation, we like that also. So, those are ways of, that's what Firen was talking about. But there are other ways to go about this. A a small coffee company, a regional one that I sometimes advise, recently got a grant from a impact investing fund, a socially responsible fund, because the grantor, the foundation, liked it that they were hiring a lot of new employees. Well, of course they were. They're a coffee company. They were opening coffee bars. Every time they open a coffee bar, they hire 10 more people. But this particular foundation liked that they were creating jobs. They were also offering training to their employees. They liked that. So they made a grant to them. So that's another way, that was a grant, by the way, not a purchase of stock. They got the money. They didn't have to give up anything. It was a grant. There's a big difference between a grant and somebody buying equity in your company. So these things can happen. And but there are also entrepreneurs, I think most entrepreneurs, who have social responsibility in their blood. I mean, they want to do good. And you can do good in a lot of ways. Training, organizing a work party to paint the classrooms of a small school. The work party could be not only your employees, but it can be some of your customers' employees. Together, let's go do this good thing for our community. And it can go on from there. So there are many, many ways to be socially responsible, but I think the overriding message here, and I thank Farron for raising this as a topic, is that social responsibility, if it doesn't come from you, it's going to come from your investors. They want it. Okay.
Thank you so much, Zev. I think it's a topic. Social responsibility is something that we do not talk about so much, and sometimes the focus is on innovation and creating these solutions, but never really how do we create purposeful impact. I'd just like to just mention that our Q&A session, our Q&A section is open. You guys can start sending in your questions, and I will be able to ask them to Zev. I think we're almost at the end of the conversation with Zev, so please feel free to send in your questions. I will read the questions coming in online as well. My next question would be, entrepreneurship dealing with failure and adversity and losses, and sometimes just wanting to pack your bags and quit, right? Can you share some personal experiences of overcoming setbacks and how you kind of bounced back from that? And what are some of the things that helped you stay on course, especially when you were starting out? Like how, and in the various ventures that you've done, how have you known when to pack and say, oh, it won't work, but how have you also known when to be resilient? And what are some of the strategies that you've used, to stay on course?
The mental health of entrepreneurs is something that I take extremely seriously. It's one of the risks of starting a company. You and your founding partners have to be functional. You have to be physically healthy and mentally healthy. Well, that's really nice, except when you're starting a company, the pressure is enormous. For example, the reason that we're speaking today, that I was invited, is that one of the people I've been talking to, Shonda Fury, knows Farron. And Shonda has been under enormous pressure. He would be the first to tell you. He's been working really hard to advance it's a platform, a technical company. He sometimes has to take breaks because the pressure just starts to overwhelm him. And I understand that. One of the companies that I started didn't go well at all. And I started to fall apart mentally. I wasn't I wasn't functioning as the way I usually do. So because it was getting really serious, I decided I was depressed. I went to a therapist, to a psychotherapist, and she helped me quite a bit. Now she didn't slap me on the face and wake me up, you know, it wasn't like that. But she helped me talk through why I was feeling all this pressure and what I could do about it. This is a big problem in the entrepreneurship community. You know, let me paint you the grimmest picture I can think of. You get funded first by your uncle and then by his business partner. And now your great idea isn't working so well. A big company appears on the scene and is kind of doing what you're doing, and now nobody wants to talk to you anymore. You can't get any customers. So you are faced with the possibility that you will have to go to your uncle and his business partner, who have loaned you, we'll say, given you $200,000 in return for 20% of your company, and you're going to tell them, it's over. We can't succeed. $200,000 down the drain. What do you think your mental state would be on that day when you're going to have that meeting? You will be a mess, my friend. You will be a real mess. It's tough, but sometimes you just get into these situations with a good heart. You know, you're doing your best, and then sort of over the horizon comes a competitor who just completely overwhelms you. That happens. So, you know, all I can say is you need to preserve your physical and your mental health in order to be an effective entrepreneur. I have faced these things. Everyone I know who has been an entrepreneur has faced these things. It's exceptional that someone avoids it completely. Oh, I avoided it completely, excuse me, with the founding of Starbucks. It went so well, and my two partners and I worked very well together. Looking back on it with the knowledge that I have today, I can see that we made a lot of good decisions. Our timing was good, et cetera, et cetera. Everything sort of clicked, fell into place. So there was no mental stress from that. The stress comes when, for instance, I can give you another example of a situation that probably some of you could tell us about. The investor says he's going to invest, or she says she's going to invest. So you go out and start spending money on programmers. Then the investor says, oh, I can't believe what happened. My father just dropped dead, and we're going to have a lot of expenses in the family to deal with this situation. So I won't be able to invest. And you are ready to shoot yourself because you've already started spending the money that she said she was going to give you. That'll put you in a bad situation mentally. So, but you need to have support of others. Take a break if you can. Have some appointments with a therapist. Try and get yourself back on track. By the way, in the entrepreneurship world, not very many people want to talk about this. It's very interesting. There's a real stigma to mental health of entrepreneurs, and it's something that should be much more public. And I thank Maren for asking about it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think one of the reasons I asked it was because, like you said, it's something that so many entrepreneurs deal with, and not just having to deal with a team. You know, you have a team and you're thinking, oh my God, what will happen to my team next month? And this investor has pulled out. So it's something, yeah, I appreciate you responding. I'll now go.
More reason to use risk management at every step, so you try your best not to get into these situations.
Yes, most definitely. We have some really interesting questions in the Q&A, and I'm really excited. The first question is actually coming from one of my mentors, so I'm very excited about it. Okay, this is from Yudi. It says, thanks for answering the question on handling failures and adversity. On the contrary, how do we manage success without quenching the fire that got us there? How do we not kill ourselves into the sense of arrival and then lose our traction? Did you get that, Zev?
That's Yeah, I completely understand it. I've dealt with it personally. Some of the people that I've talked with in the last few years have also dealt with it. Things are going well, got customers, but there's always a new set of problems. One of the tragedies about life is that you solve something and then another problem comes up. I mean, it happens in families, but it also happens in business. There are big issues. For instance, as you continue to grow, most companies need more investment. Not all, but many, let me say, many companies need more investment to pay for their growth. After the founders sold Starbucks this was in the mid 1980s, a long time ago. The company was then led by a famous entrepreneur named Howard Schultz. And he took the company from being a local company in Seattle to being a global company. Did a magnificent job. And in his situation, he had to raise money constantly for a period of 20 years, constantly. But the company was successful and he was able to raise it. Why did he need so much money? Because when you open a store, a Starbucks location, I'm going to guesstimate, it probably costs about $200,000. Well, you keep doing that at a rapid rate, there's no way the company can pay for all those stores if you're expanding at a rapid rate. So the company throughout the 90s and the first 15 years of the present century had to keep finding additional sums of money. That's a problem of success, isn't it? Another problem that can happen, I don't see this very often, but it can happen, is the entrepreneur starts, the expression in the United States is, she believes her own stuff. What that means is she's talked about success and the greatness of her company so long that she believes it. And she's not operating in the real world anymore. And this is a problem with people who achieve some success. Well, one of the great symptoms, of course, is they start spending too much money personally. They take money out of the company in salary or in distributions of money, and they start living the good life of a house, a car, travel, those kinds of things, and they stop thinking so much about the company. Not good, not good. That's another symptom of success. Also, something else that can happen, I've only seen this a few times, is they stop listening to the people around them. They start thinking, I made this company. I could have done it without you guys, so I'm not going to listen to you anymore. Oh, really? What were we doing in all those meetings, sir? There's a problem when people become too egotistical with success. And one of the symptoms of that is you'll see that some entrepreneurs publish books about why they were so successful. I'm not a believer in doing that myself. And I am sure that the people who work for them, the vice presidents of their company, might write a somewhat different book about why the company was successful. So these are issues with success. And then, of course, one more is distractions. You decide your company now should invest in something else that you're not very good at, but you just like it. You want to do that. I'm successful here. I know I'll be successful there. Well, you have to use risk management to make sure you're going to be successful there. But once you get a big ego, it's pretty easy to believe your own ideas without doing the research. Okay.
Thank you so much, Zev. The next question comes from, so you guys can keep sending your questions in the Q&A section. I'll be able to read and find them better there. Okay, The next question is, when do you know it's time to scale up the business? Are there particular indicators? This is from Breezy. Are there indicators that would tell you that, well, you can't operate at the same level anymore? And what are, I think, those particular indicators to know to scale up your business?
I'm going to answer that with a real life situation. I'm working with a company. I'm having meetings online with a company in Western Canada, one of the big cities in Western Canada. And they have a successful location. It's a food business. They manufacture and retail and wholesale a particular kind of food. And they want to expand. It appears that they have really tapped into a great idea. What they want to do is franchise their operation and open it in many other big cities in Canada. That's all. Okay. Seems like a doable idea, right? But I'm excited for them, frankly. I think it's pretty interesting what they're doing. But at our most recent meeting, we were analyzing. I asked them to give me their financial projection for the coming year, and they didn't do that. What they gave me was the financial results for the preceding year. Actually, it was from January to October of this year. So their financial results. But the financial results that they gave me weren't in the usual format that I'm used to seeing. It was more like a sales report. This is how, the information about their expenses was a little inadequate, sketchy. So I realized that what these people are doing, and they're doing something pretty wonderful in the food business, is they want to leap ahead before they have got their first location straightened out. They don't know exactly how profitable they are, really. And the more questions I ask, nice polite questions, the more I realize that they are not ready to expand. So this is one type of situation. Looks good, but you don't really understand everything about your company and you're thinking about expanding. So let's flip that around so that the person who asked the question can get an answer. When do you know that it is time to scale up? Well, let's see. Let's assume that you have, I have to make an assumption here. You have some kind of a platform that's very useful for mid-sized farmers, not the little guys, but the corporate farmers. Some kind of software that makes their operations work better. And it's going pretty well in your country and in one neighboring country, but now you want to expand and start marketing it in countries all over South Africa. Well, I would say that, if you're operating in 2 countries and you want to expand into and add 6 more, that could work. But it's sort of like starting another business. You have to do the forecast. You have to manage risk because you're going to have to hire people to do the marketing and to close the sales in those other new 6 countries. Well, that's an investment on your part. So you have to decide whether you can actually be profitable. And one more possibility is you have a fashion business that has a retail store in the city where you live, and you have unique clothes that you have made for your fashion store, and it's going really well, and you want to expand. If you have the systems in place, so your business with one location and maybe what we call a workroom, a place where they make clothing that's not part of your company, that's supplying your store. You make the designs, the workroom makes the clothing, and then you sell it from your store. You have to go to the workroom. You have to ask them, if I expand, can you service my needs? Suppose my orders doubled next year and then doubled again the following year. Could you deal with that? Because if they can't, you can't expand without finding a new source. So, and also you need to be sure that you understand how much money it's going to cost to do this expansion that the participant asked about. If you're going to scale up, what's it going to cost? Do you need a bigger piece of equipment? Do you need 3 more employees? Are you finally going to have an office instead of operating virtually? You know, where everybody goes to a coffee bar and that's your office. These are questions that you have to ask yourself, and you have to really, be clear in thinking about them. Because there is an expression that people used to use called expanding into oblivion. It means you expand and expand, and you don't have enough money, and then you're like a balloon, you just explode and it's all over. You can't pay your bills.
Yep. Thank you so much, Zev. I hope that answers your question. We'll go to the next question by Joshua. Joshua's question says, how does one differentiate when getting into an established market? So yeah.
That's a great question. Thank you, Joshua. How do you differentiate yourself in an established market? Bicycle repair, or bicycle sales and repair. So in many places, it's a big business. So you have to find a way to make yourself look different, and actually maybe be different. There could be a number of ways to do that. What languages do you speak in the store? What languages do your employees speak? Could you differentiate yourself by putting a sign on the window that lists all the languages that you speak? Now, most big corporations that you're competing with, or chains, they aren't going to do that. Would one of your employees locally famous in your city or in your country for being a star bicycle racer? You could promote that. The home of champions. So there are many ways, Joshua, to differentiate. I'm going to give you a story that's really ironic. It's about a guy from Cameroon. He's been in the United States for 20 years. He had a career with IBM in the software business. And when they eventually said goodbye to him, he had accumulated some money, and he decided he would open a coffee company. But he's from Cameroon, right? And he was asking himself the same question that Joshua just asked us. How can I differentiate? There are lots of coffee bars. And he decided there were 2 ways he could differentiate himself. One is the way the coffee is roasted. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And the other is the style of the company. When I say the style, I'm talking about the graphics, the interior decor, some other factors. So here's what he did. He decided that his coffee bars would all roast in the coffee bar. So he did some research and found that there are these little in-store roasters. They're called air roasters. If you're curious, you can look up coffee air roasting in Google and you'll see what I'm talking about. But it made it possible for him to roast right in front of the customer. So person comes in, gets their coffee, very popular thing to do. And then while they're waiting, they look over on the right and there's coffee beans being roasted. Well, they don't do that at Starbucks. And they don't do that at most chains, Costas and all the other international chains. They roast in a central location. So that's one way he differentiated himself. Like we've got our hands on your coffee beans. The other way is he made the decor of the store in its colors and style look like a store in Kribi in the Cameroons. Kribi is a coastal town. And I mean, it looks African. And, it's bold colors. And of course, everybody else in his industry, in the retail coffee business, has very muted colors. So he completely differentiated the way his company looks. Even the exterior of the company is pretty bright colors. And those two things, everything else about his company, frankly, to me, is very similar to his competitors. But he's doing really well. He's got 4 locations now, and he's starting to get into the wholesale business too. So he analyzed how he was going to differentiate. Now, in many fields, it isn't that easy. You know, what if you don't have a physical location? What if you're just online? Well, there are still ways to differentiate yourself. And usually by studying other industries, you can figure out a way to make you look very, very interesting. One way, of course, an obvious one is if you're in a B2B business. A fellow I know has done this. His customer service, it's a B2B software business. His customer service is the best. And what happens if you do that for a couple of years, you're just always helping customers in the way they want to be helped, is you get a reputation. So there's if everybody goes to a conference in the industry, and who are they talking about? They're saying, wow, our supplier of software for our operating system is the best. We've never had such service from anybody else. People will talk like that. Mm-hmm. So you can differentiate yourself that way. And how would you promote that? How would you make that known that you're actually providing better service? Video testimonials on your website. You get a customer who loves you to death, who just loves you, to do a 40-second video saying, these guys, the video appears online on the website. These guys at XYZ company, they say they have customer service that's the best. Let me tell you, they do. I'm the general manager of ABC company. We use their software, and the customer service is the difference. Man, that's one way to differentiate yourself.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Zev. My next question comes from Aka. This actually is a 2-part question. The first question is, she says, I love how insightful this conversation is. Thank you so much. I'm struggling to keep up with my business. My personality is being a ray of sunshine, but I've realized that a lot of clients may not appreciate that. How do I handle such challenges? And her second part of the question is, how do you know it's time to move on?
I have very strong feelings about the second question. I need you to clarify for me, Farhan, the question about personality.
Yeah. Okay. So I think she said her personality is being a ray of sunshine. So being very friendly, bending over backwards, to make sure that I work well with my clients. But some clients are not taking that too well. Some probably maybe taking advantage of me being like that, being nice, being
yeah.
Yeah.
So she's trying to be as pleasant as possible and as helpful as possible. Some people appreciate it. Other people just say they want more. They want more. Okay, I got it. Well, I'm not a psychologist, Aka, but this is the subject that you're raising with that question is setting limits. You do have to set limits, and when you're in this sounds a little bit like a service business of some kind, and in that situation, you are probably thinking, if I for 1 minute don't continue to be as helpful as possible and react to every single request, I'm going to lose this customer, which will reduce my sales, which will reduce my income, personal income. Well, yeah, that's real life. I mean, that could happen. But you do have to have some kind of limit. Maybe you could explain to all customers, the ones that love you and the ones that are too demanding, all of the extra things that you do for them. So, you could say, you put it in a positive, say, it really gives me and my team a lot of pleasure to do these extra things for all of our customers, and you name a few extra things. And that's why we're here. We want to be helpful. But by putting it in that positive way, what you're saying is, we just want you to know that we're doing these extra things for you, and we're putting it in this very nice way. But we want you to know because we don't want you to take it for granted. We don't want you to expect it all the time. And especially with a difficult customer, that can be really great. You can say, oh, Betty, that's a really great idea that you have there. We're not going to be able to work on that right away, but we'll work on the other part, the basic part of your request. But that new part that you're trying to add on, we're going to have to wait at least a month to work on that. That's a nice way of saying we're not going to do that. The other part of the question, when is it time to move on? Oh man, do I love that question. I am a guy who in most of my own businesses has been the one who moved on. I have a very strong sense of who I am and what I can do and what I can't do. Where in the period of my life where I was very active starting companies, when the company got to, let's say in the case of Starbucks, we had 200 employees. We were a very strong force, but only in Seattle. We were a local company, profitable. Things were going quite well. But I knew that I had to get out. So I was the first partner of the founders, there were three of us, to leave. The other two left about 2.5 years later. And sold the company. So first I sold my shares to my partners, then my partners sold the entire company to somebody else. Why did I do that? Well, I did it because I knew that I wasn't the right guy to be working in a company that had 3 layers of management. I'm a startup guy. I need a small organization. I like solving the kind of problems that a startup has. And I've kept to that most of my life. You have to know who you are. I wouldn't say that I burned out. That wasn't the situation. I just realized that this had become a medium-sized corporation now, and I'm not a medium-sized corporation type of guy. So in a smaller company, like for instance, whatever Aka's company is, if you are asking the question, when is it time to move on? Then it's time to move on. And just by asking the question, you're already saying, boy, and I'm getting pretty tired of this. So it's time to start thinking not about closing the business. It's time to start thinking about who is going to take over the business and how are you going to benefit from that? It's time to make a transition plan. Get yourself out. Hopefully get some money for it. I mean, if you have a group of customers, Aka, you have something that can be sold. And, there are many people in wherever you live, organizations for business people that can help you start to think this through. How you're going to package up this business, market it as an opportunity to someone else. But I would say that if you're asking the question, it's time to start the process.
All right. Thank you so much, Zev. Aka, I hope that answers your question. We are soon running towards the end of our session. It's almost 8:30 our time. So I'll quickly run through the questions so that I can get as much from Zev as possible. Did you have an exit strategy, or did other circumstances lead to the sale of the company? I think this kind of ties into what you are talking about. Yeah.
The founders of Starbucks had a fantastic exit strategy, but we didn't know it. It was very funny. So I said I exited first. The company had enough money to buy me out. Okay, so I'm out. My 2 partners are in still. So within 6 months, just coincidentally, the company decided that they needed a new director of sales and marketing. Had nothing to do with me. new director of sales and marketing. So they were aware that a fellow who was a director of sales and marketing for one of their vendors, this is a big company on the East Coast of the United States in the New York area, was a really cool guy. And they decided they wanted to see if they could get him to move to Seattle and come to work for them. And they started talking with him, and he was interested. He was newly married, and he and his wife were interested in getting out of New York. And so he did. He took the job and moved to Seattle. And his name was Howard Schultz. He was the guy who took over Starbucks and made it into a global company. So he came to work for Starbucks. He's a pretty entrepreneurial guy. So the first thing that happened is he wanted to do a joint venture with Starbucks. He asked his employers if he could start a coffee bar chain in Seattle with their help. They said, yeah, we could benefit from that. So Mr. Schultz got some investors, and then Starbucks put in some time and money and products, and he opened 3 coffee bars. Then he came back to the founders and said, I'd really like to buy Starbucks, the Seattle company, and merge it with a little coffee bar company. I'm going to put them together. And, if you guys are ready to stop, you've been doing this for 12 years. If you're ready to stop, I'm ready to purchase the company. And that was the beginning of a conversation that took 1 year. And in the end, Mr. Schultz acquired Starbucks, and my partners were able to exit like I had. They got bought out. Well, why do I tell you that story? Because that is about the coolest exit strategy I've ever heard of. They hired a guy who was a bold entrepreneur, a person who people are attracted to. He was able to raise money, and he became their own employee, became their exit strategy. And that's not completely unusual. Sometimes in the United States, there's a mechanism by which you can sell your company to your employees. I have a friend who is a house remodeling company. They were doing about $10 million a year in house remodeling, a medium-sized company. And he needed an exit strategy. So he started talking with the 3 guys who were the vice presidents who ran the company. And they worked out a deal, and they bought the company from him slowly. He gave them a real deal, and they bought him out, and he's very happy. So exit strategies can come in many forms. The most common one is you sell the company. Who would buy your company? Well, one of your competitors might buy you out. I'm working right now with a small software company that has specialized in one little industry, and there's a new player in that industry. So it's 2 younger guys backed by a venture capital firm who develops some software. And at my suggestion, this guy went to those 2 younger guys and said, hey, you're my competitor. You seem to be really good at raising money from venture capitalists. And they said, well, yeah, we are. He said, well, why don't you go to your venture capitalists and buy me out? You would go instantly from having 20% of the market to having 50% of the market, because we have 30%. Well, they're actually talking about it seriously now, really seriously, and it might happen. So, that exit strategies happen in many ways. I can just a handy sidebar here. Having good financial records is a real helpful thing when you want to sell your company.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Zev. My next question comes from UD again. It says, what were the top 3 success factors for you as you co-founded Starbucks? And are those SFs still valid today? And also, what advice or guidance would you give a 20-year-old Zev? Now, this one I want to hear, like advice to your younger self and your top 3 success factors.
of course, at the time Starbucks was established in its first decade, only in Seattle, nice successful company. We weren't very good at analyzing ourselves, why we were successful. If you had asked me this question in 1980, I don't know if I could have answered it. But because I had relationships with so many people who are starting companies, I now can look back and say, oh, that's why it worked. So you've caught me in asking the question. You've caught me at a good time. So I would say the 3 success factors, if I have to pick 3, number 1, there were 3 of us, not one of us, 3 of us from the beginning. And it turned out that that was very useful, because that's 3 times the mental capacity, 3 times the number of people to run around and take care of all the little things that you have to do with a startup. And on top of that, it turned out, although we didn't know this when we first started working on the company, it turned out that each of us was good at something different. We didn't all have the same abilities. I was the startup guy. I could do manage a million things at the same time. One of the other partners turned out to be a very good financial manager. We didn't know that. I don't even know if he knew it, but he turned out to be a really good financial manager. And the third partner turned out to be an excellent, I would say, marketing theorist. His mind, he had been a journalist up until this point, but I don't know where it came from, but he understood our intended audience, our customers, both wholesale and retail, and he knew what they wanted from us and how we should appear to them. He positioned our company perfectly. So having 3 partners made that possible. If I had started the company alone, it would have flopped. There's no way it would have made it. Would have made it to the degree that it did. That's one. Another one, we picked a field that wasn't completely new. Hey, people have been drinking coffee for more than 400 years. We didn't invent that. So it was a familiar type of enterprise that fortunately had gotten pretty stale in the United States. There hadn't been any real innovation in the United States in the coffee business for a long, long time. Coffee bars really didn't exist yet when we started our company. So when we opened it, it was a coffee bean company, but we were innovators, especially we created community with our customers. We had a policy of no compromise on product. And we believed strongly in training. We trained first we trained ourselves, then we trained our employees, then we trained our customers. So these were very, very important factors. Then there was an X factor, which nobody in the coffee business really likes to talk about. For those of you who have been, say, outside of Africa, say a trip to Europe, you know that there are coffee bars everywhere, all over Europe, and it's also in places like Dubai and Riyadh. There are hundreds of coffee bars in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. This is something that would make you scratch your head a little bit. Well, why is everybody going to get drinking so much coffee now? One of the reasons, yes, it's social. And in some places, it's a little bit of status, but there's caffeine in that coffee, folks. And caffeine kind of wakes you up and doesn't do you much harm. So I think that caffeine was a major element in the success of the coffee industry, not just Starbucks, but the entire industry. So those are 3 of the things. Advice to a 20-year-old. It's an honor to be asked the question. I thank you. The primary advice, really, I'm sorry to tell you, I am the bearer of, I think, what is not going to be perceived as good news. You got to learn how to do the numbers. it's extremely important that you understand how money works in any little company. And that you understand, for instance, the ratios that apply to your type of business. Like if it's a retail business, let's go back to fashion. If it's a retail business, what must the cost of goods be? What do you have to pay for the products that you're selling? It's called cost of goods. And if you don't know that, and if you don't know what it should be in the industry, you got to figure it out. Go to organizations like Farns and find out. This is information that's available. So I would say that the best thing you could do would be to take financial literacy classes and learn how to do the 3 basic spreadsheets that you need to do for a business, at least to understand them. That would be the basic. Make sure you understand them. And then you can be the person at the meeting with a funder or with your partner who says, well, that's a really great idea, my friend, except that it's going to change our cost of goods from 31% to 40%, and it will put us out of business. You want to be the person who can say that.
Thank you, Zev. We're a bit past time, but
Yes.
I will combine a few of the questions. And yeah, I would ask that yeah. Unfortunately, we're closing the question and answer session. I will only take the questions that we have. And Zev, in under a minute, we will do a speed round. These questions are both from Joshua's. This is from Joshua Kaunga and from Joshua Munemo. The question is, what advice would you give to a person that wants to start any business but doubts that the timing might be wrong, or don't think they are competent enough, or think that they don't have the capacity for it yet? And then the other question is, how does one
Can I take that one? Let me take that one first.
Okay.
I'm not sure how old the Joshuas are, but well, the obvious one is to work for a company that's in the same field. Just take a job in the same field and watch what goes on. It might surprise you, Joshua, that some of the people who are running companies aren't as smart as you are. That actually happens. You need to figure out if you're as good as they are. Let's put it that way. And if you lack technical expertise or business know-how, sign up for classes. You can learn a lot by doing that. But don't assume that everybody's smarter or more experienced than you are. Get inside and take a look, and then while you're working for them, go take some classes. Second part.
All right, thank you, Zev. Okay, the next one from Joshua Munemo is, how does one market a new product on the market that has worked well in other countries?
Well, it's tough to know exactly. I mean, I can only speak in general terms because I don't know the product or the countries. I don't think it's any different than marketing of any type. You have to understand the customers and what they need. Remember, what typically happens is you're excited about the product or service and you understand it, but you don't understand why the customers are so excited about it. I can give you an example of what I mean. In a number of countries, you can pre-order a coffee beverage so that it is being made as you're walking toward the coffee bar. You're in a hurry, you want your special coffee drink, and you want to take it with you as you walk toward your office. So you use your phone and the app that's on your phone to order that drink, and then you pick it up. So you think, well, that's nice, you know. And the people that made that application that's on your phone, sometimes they're not working for that company, they're independent. the company that makes apps. They know what's coming, but the coffee bar owner doesn't quite get it. The coffee bar owner is thinking, oh, I'm going to get more business, and I'll be able to sell more drinks with the same number of employees, et cetera, et cetera. But what really makes that whole system work, and it works really well in many parts of the world, is that customers love walking into a coffee bar, seeing 6 people waiting in line for a drink. They walk over to where the drinks have been prepared for their mobile order customers, and they pick it up and walk out. They skip the line. And that turns out to be the great appeal of pre-ordering, is that people just love the status of looking smarter than the people who are waiting in line for their drinks. So, I mean, if I were a person who was designing apps, I probably would market the app to coffee bar companies by saying, make your customers happy, help them skip the line.
All right. Then I will go to the next question by Chiunda Mwanza. The question is, what is the best way to remain consistent to your brand and core values while diversifying product and service offerings?
Wow, what a cool question. This is a more sophisticated entrepreneur. So I mentioned that I had 2 partners, and that one of them was very good at market positioning. He was also really good, unusually good, at making sure that we were true to our brand, including management of our logo. By the way, today, 50 years later, Starbucks is still really good at managing its identity. If you want to get lots of email, do something that infringes on Starbucks logo, like try to copy their logo for your business. They will be all over you, no matter where you are in the world. They're very careful about managing and controlling how they look. So, sorry, can I have the question again? I got a little bit lost in my mind. Sound.
Sorry, my mic was, just realized my mic was, just trying to find the question. What is the best way to remain consistent to your brand and core
so you have to have,
so
you have to have, I would say, in writing somewhere, in a file in your computer, what your brand stands for. You have to understand it, not just from your point of view, but from the customer's point of view. What do you have to do to keep their attention of the existing customers and to get more customers? And you have to make sure that you're doing that. But now you want to go into another field. The classic example of that in the city that I live in is you have a very successful company that fixes plumbing problems for residences and businesses. You have trucks and workers, and maybe you're doing, in this country, $10-15 million a year in business. But now you realize that the same people, when your plumbers are at somebody's nice house, and they say, the customer says, hey, does your company also could you repair the deck, that's the outside deck and the patio around my house? Is that something that you do? And people keep asking your plumbers if they do that kind of work. Can you build me a deck, or can you fix the deck in my house? So eventually you decide that you're not only going to be a plumbing company, you're going to be a handyman company where you build decks and fix patios. So you establish what I would call an umbrella brand. ABC Plumbing is your company. Now you become ABC Company Plumbing Division. And now you also have ABC Company Handyman Division. And then later on, ABC House Painting Division, et cetera, et cetera. And this is something that's been done quite a bit. You take your brand and you move it up a notch. It becomes what's called the Uber brand, the higher brand, the upper brand, and then you can have divisions under it. and you can establish the criteria, the rules for how each division is going to present itself. But I've always liked that because it's a way for new businesses, new parts of your company to capitalize and benefit from the well-established brand that you've got.
Right. Okay. And our final question comes from Chanda Chisakuta. Yeah, I kept this one for last deliberately. How can small businesses, especially in developing countries, access support or purchase affordable equipment from developed nations?
Again, how can they, say it again? How can
small business, especially in developing countries, access support or purchase affordable equipment from developing nations?
Access support first. Well, Shanda, it's interesting that this is what I call a setup question. Shanda is a master of accessing support. And I appreciate that he was willing to set me up to, this wasn't prearranged. You have to be persistent. Shanda is a very persistent entrepreneur. And he has been really good at, how should I put it, at trying to get help from people and companies that are already where he wants to go with his company. His company is an online platform. And he's pretty bold that way. He's engaging, he makes his appeal to the companies that he wants to get help from, or to individuals he wants to get help from. He tries to sweet talk them, to get them to get into his camp and be part of his extended team. But he's at the same time kind of bold in his outreach and engaging and not hostile once he gets in contact with someone. He's not always successful at this, by the way. Nobody is. But he bounces back and says, okay, that person in India, they're not going to help me. Fine, I'll go find somebody in Nigeria. What was the second question? Getting equipment from this is a much more difficult thing. I'm going to assume that this means how are we going to finance equipment, find and finance equipment from another country? Well, it's pretty obvious. You have to go shopping. And I'll give you an example from the early stage of almost any coffee company. The first thing that you run into is you need to have a coffee roaster. And usually it's a significant investment. It's a big piece of industrial equipment. And the first thing that you would do, of course, is would be to avoid buying a new one. That's frankly what the founders of Starbucks did, and many other people that I've met over the last 50 years have done the same thing. You try to find used equipment. Hopefully that has been rebuilt and checked out by somebody who is an expert. You can save enormous amounts of money that way. Another possibility is that there is, let's assume for a minute, that there's the kind of equipment that you need, like say it's equipment for a commercial bakery, a high volume baking company. Well, there's lots of that equipment, lots of it. And so maybe somebody has a dealer has an inventory of equipment that is excess. It's just sitting there. It's not making him any money. And you realize this. You've been to visit him in another city that's 2 hours from where you are, and you say to him, well, look, you can just keep this equipment here, or what I would really like you to do is to rent it to me. I'll give you a deposit. You rent it to me, and I'll be a nice source of income for you every month. You'll make much more money than you're going to make if this thing sits here in your warehouse any longer gathering dust. That's an interesting proposal from one business person to another. But it certainly isn't difficult to find the equipment. Everybody posts everything online now. You can look at the inventory, say, of used equipment in most cities in the world. by just poking around for a couple of hours, sitting at your desk drinking a beer. So don't be bashful about that. Thank you for the question, Shonda. Okay. Now it's getting late where you are, but it's only 11:45 in the morning here in Seattle.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I feel like I'm the bearer of bad news, but unfortunately, every good thing has to come to an end, and we are unfortunately at the end of this session. I don't know about you, but I will definitely come back to this session. It has been a really enlightening session, and I think there's been a lot of practicality to this session. These sessions are available on our Bongo Hive YouTube channel. So feel free to go to our Bongo Hive YouTube channel. Feel free to visit our pages. That's Bongo Hive. And you'll be able to find this particular session and just watch it all over again. Take notes. And if you joined in late, trust me, every part of this session has really been amazing and engaging. To Zev, thank you so much. We will definitely be back. Thank you for just offering your wealth of knowledge and expertise, and thank you for the service you continuously do for startups around the world. We really do appreciate you. And
thank you for those kind words, Fern.
Thank you to everyone for joining into this session. You guys made this session so interactive. We had to close the Q&A session, which I always feel is a good thing. It means there's a lot that we want to learn from each other. But yeah, let's keep in touch. And who knows, Zev might be a surprise guest really soon. But just keep a lookout to our various social media platforms and subscribe to our newsletter for announcements so that you don't miss things like this. Yeah, thank you so much and have a good evening.